I always knew my parents resented my relationship with Grandpa Henry. They never said it outright, but I could feel it in the way my mom's smile tightened whenever he pulled me in for a hug, in the way my dad's jaw clenched when Henry clapped me on the back and told me I was the only one in this family with a real work ethic. I guess it stung for them. They had spent their whole lives chasing easy money, borrowing from family, cutting corners, looking for quick paydays. Grandpa Henry had built everything from nothing. He worked brutal hours, saved every penny, and despised handouts. That's why we got along so well. I never asked him for money, even when I was struggling through college, juggling 2 part-time jobs just to afford rent. And he noticed. I respect a man who can stand on his own 2 feet, he told me once, sliding a steaming mug of coffee across the kitchen table. Your parents? They never learned that. I had laughed awkwardly, unsure how to respond. He just shook his head. Don't let them drag you down, Danny. Some people will do anything to keep a good man from getting ahead. I hadn't understood what he meant at the time. Now, I did. When Henry passed away, I wasn't thinking about inheritance. I was thinking about the only person in my family who had ever truly believed in me. But my parents? They were already counting their future fortune before the funeral was even over. Then the will was read. I will never forget the moment the lawyer cleared his throat and said the words that changed everything. The entirety of Henry Whitmore's estate, including financial assets, investments, and personal properties, is bequeathed to his grandson, Daniel Whitmore. Silence. Then, what the hell does that mean? My mother's voice cracked, eyes darting between me and the lawyer. The lawyer, an older man with silver-rimmed glasses, didn't even blink. It means that Mr. Whitmore's assets have been left solely to Daniel. A stunned pause. My dad let out a short, humorless laugh. That can't be right. It's correct, the lawyer said. Your father was very clear in his wishes. Mom turned to me, her expression shifting into something sharp and ugly. Did you know about this? I shook my head. My mouth was dry. No. She scoffed. Bullshit. Linda, the lawyer interjected, his voice firm. I assure you, this was Henry's decision. The will was drafted and notarized properly. There is no mistake. My dad exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. This doesn't make sense. We're his children. We should be getting something. The lawyer folded his hands neatly on the desk. You should, he agreed. But Mr. Whitmore felt otherwise. It was like a fuse had been lit. We raised you, Mom spat, turning back to me. We sacrificed for you, and you think you can just take everything? I flinched at the venom in her voice. Dad leaned forward, his voice dangerously low. You're gonna fix this. I stared at him. Fix what? This mistake, Mom hissed. You know damn well that money belongs to us. I let out a sharp breath, shaking my head. Henry didn't seem to think so. Her eyes narrowed. You think this is funny? No, I said, my voice steady. I think it's exactly what he wanted. A tense silence. Then Mom exhaled slowly, smoothing her blouse like she was trying to collect herself. All right, let's be rational about this. I think we just were. She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. I'm done talking, I said. Then I turned and walked away. I should have known they wouldn't let it go. For the next few days, my parents didn't say a word about the will. No screaming. No threats. Nothing. It was almost worse than if they had. They moved through the house like everything was normal. My mom still made dinner, my dad still sat in his recliner watching TV, and I caught myself wondering, had they actually accepted it? I should have known better. Little things started disappearing. First, my phone charger. Then my car keys. My leather jacket, the one Henry gave me for my 18th birthday, vanished from the closet. And then, the money. I logged into my bank account one morning, planning to move some of Henry's inheritance into a separate savings account. But when I saw the balance, my stomach dropped. $0. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my ears. That couldn't be right. I clicked into my transaction history. Transfer, $320,000. Transfer, $145,000. Transfer, $68,500. Gone. Every last cent. My hand shook as I grabbed my phone and dialed the bank. After an agonizing 10-minute hold, a woman with a bore-sounding voice answered. Hi. Yeah, I need to report unauthorized transactions, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. She asked me a series of security questions before finally pulling up my account. All right, Mr. Whitmore, she said. I see the transactions. They were completed using the primary account holder's login credentials. My breath hitched. What? They were done through online banking, she continued. From a recognized device, your home computer. My blood ran cold. Can you tell me where the money was sent? I asked, though I already knew. She hesitated. I'm sorry, sir, but due to privacy policies, I can't disclose recipient details. I clenched my jaw. Listen, the only other people in this house are my parents, and I did not send them my money. So I need you to reverse those transactions. Now. Another pause. Then, sir, I'm afraid we can't do that. I gripped the edge of my desk. Excuse me. If the transactions were completed using verified credentials, they aren't considered unauthorized. You may need to discuss this with your family directly. I nearly crushed my phone in my fist. I didn't even bother hanging up properly. I marched downstairs, my footsteps heavy against the hardwood. My parents were at the kitchen table, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. Where's my money? My voice came out dangerously low. My dad didn't even look up from his newspaper. Good morning to you, too. Cut the crap, I snapped. Where is my money? My mom sighed, setting her mug down. Danny, don't be so dramatic. I let out a bitter laugh. Dramatic? You stole from me. She folded her hands on the table like a school principal about to give a lecture. We needed it. Oh, bullshit, I shot back. Her expression hardened. Your father's investments aren't doing well. We had no choice. You had plenty of choices, I said through gritted teeth. You just picked the one that benefited you the most. Dad finally spoke, his voice gruff. Watch your tone, boy. I took a step closer, my hands trembling with barely restrained rage. Or what? You'll steal from me again. Mom exhaled sharply, like I was being unreasonable. Danny, listen. No, I cut her off. You listen. You stole from me. You betrayed me. And now, you're sitting here, acting like I'm the problem. She tilted her head, eyes calculating. And what are you going to do about it? A loaded question. I could feel it. The challenge, the smug certainty that I had nowhere to go, that I'd have to stay. I exhaled slowly. I'm leaving. For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. Oh, Danny. She reached out like she wanted to touch my arm, but I stepped back. Don't be impulsive. You don't have a plan. I'll figure it out. She let out a soft, condescending chuckle. Where will you go? I didn't answer. She exchanged a glance with my dad. He smirked, shaking his head like he had already won. You'll be back, he muttered. I turned on my heel, walked upstairs, and started packing. I packed fast. Clothes, laptop, important documents. I shoved everything into a duffel bag, hands shaking with adrenaline. I didn't have time to think. If I thought too much, I might hesitate. And if I hesitated, I'd second-guess everything. I slung the bag over my shoulder, grabbed my phone, and headed for the stairs. Halfway down, Mom's voice floated from the kitchen. Danny, don't be dramatic. I stopped. Slowly, I turned to face her. She sat at the table, perfectly composed, stirring her coffee like we weren't in the middle of a goddamn war. Dad barely acknowledged me, still glued to his phone. Dramatic? I echoed, my voice flat. Mom exhaled like she was dealing with a stubborn child. You're running away because of a little misunderstanding. I let out a sharp breath, shaking my head. Misunderstanding? You stole from me. We needed that money, she said, her voice calm and deliberate. Dad finally looked up, his expression unreadable. Don't be stupid, Danny. This is your home. You think you can just take off and survive on your own? I laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because it was unbelievable. I was already surviving on my own. You just made sure I had nothing to survive with. Mom's expression didn't change. You'll be back, she said smoothly, like she was certain. I clenched my jaw and turned away. As I stepped out of the house, the cold air hit me like a slap. My car was sitting in the driveway, but of course, I had no way to get gas. My parents had made sure of that. I had about $30 in cash. It would have to do. I climbed into the driver's seat, tossing my bag in the back. For a few seconds, I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel. My chest felt tight, my breath uneven. I needed a plan. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Chris, my best friend. My safest bet. Me. Hey, I need a place to crash. Can I come over? The response came almost immediately. Chris, dude, of course. What's going on? Me. I'll explain when I get there. I pulled out of the driveway without looking back. Chris lived in a small apartment above a coffee shop. When I got there, he was already waiting at the door, arms crossed. His face shifted the second he saw me. Jesus, man. He stepped aside to let me in. You look like shit. I let out a weak laugh. Feel like it too. I dropped my bag by the couch and sank onto it, my whole body suddenly exhausted. Chris sat across from me. All right, spill. So I did. I told him everything. The will, my parents' reaction, the stolen money. By the time I finished, Chris looked like he was seconds from punching something. They fucking robbed you. Yeah, I exhaled. They did. Did you call the cops? I shook my head. They used my login. The bank won't do shit. Chris ran a hand through his hair. Dude, you need a lawyer. I let out a humorless laugh. With what money? Silence. Then Chris frowned. Didn't your grandpa have a lawyer? The guy who handled the will? I sat up straighter. Holy shit. I hadn't even thought about that. Henry's lawyer, Mr. Caldwell, he was the one who read the will. If anyone could help, it was him. Chris saw the look on my face and smirked. There it is. I grabbed my phone and searched for Caldwell's number in my emails. My hand shook as I dialed. After a few rings, a deep, familiar voice answered. This is Richard Caldwell. I took a breath. Mr. Caldwell, this is Daniel Whitmore. I need your help. Caldwell didn't sound surprised to hear from me. Daniel, he said, his voice calm and steady. I was expecting your call. That threw me off. You were. A pause. Then, did something happen with your parents? I let out a bitter laugh. Yeah, they drained my bank account. Silence. Then a slow exhale. I had a feeling they might try something like that. I gripped the phone tighter. Can you help? Meet me at my office tomorrow morning, he said. 8 sharp. I agreed, hung up, and let my head fall back against the couch. Chris raised an eyebrow. So? He wants to meet, I muttered. Chris smirked. That's a good sign, right? I hope so. The next morning, I barely slept. I was at Caldwell's office 15 minutes early, gripping a cup of coffee I hadn't touched. When he finally waved me in, he was already flipping through a thick file. Tell me everything, he said. So I did. I told him about logging into my account and seeing the money gone. About how the bank refused to help. About my parents sitting at the kitchen table, smug as hell, like they'd earned what they stole. When I finished, Caldwell sighed, rubbing his temple. Unfortunately, since they used your login credentials, legally, the bank sees it as a voluntary transfer. My stomach twisted. So they get away with it? He tapped his fingers on the desk, deep in thought. Then, finally, not necessarily. I straightened. What do you mean? Caldwell pulled a different folder from his drawer. Henry anticipated something like this. That's why he set up a secondary trust fund. I blinked. What? He flipped open the file, scanning the papers before sliding them toward me. Your grandfather didn't just leave you money. He left you assets. Property. Investments. He paused. Including a house. I stared at him. A house. Caldwell nodded. It's yours. Fully paid off. Henry bought it years ago, kept it in his name, but in his will, it transfers to you. I slowly picked up the folder, my hand shaking. A house. A fucking house. Not only was I not broke, I had somewhere to go. Caldwell watched my expression carefully. Your parents don't know about this, he said. Henry was very clear about keeping it off the books until after the will was executed. A sharp breath left my chest. So, they can't touch it? No, Caldwell said. They can't. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. I flipped through the file, scanning the details. The house was about an hour away, on the outskirts of town. A little isolated, but that was perfect. They're going to lose their minds when they find out, I muttered. Caldwell smirked. Oh, I imagined so. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. My parents had taken everything they could from me, but they had no idea I still had this. And I wasn't about to tell them. Not yet. I drove to the house that same afternoon. The address Caldwell gave me led to a quiet road just outside the city. As I pulled up, I saw it, a small but solid-looking house nestled between tall trees. A wraparound porch. Big windows. A little overgrown, but still standing strong. It was mine. For the first time in days, I felt something other than rage or exhaustion. Relief. I stepped out of the car, duffel bag slung over my shoulder, and made my way to the front door. The key Caldwell gave me fit perfectly in the lock. When I pushed the door open, the scent of dust and wood filled the air. The place had been sitting empty for a while, but everything inside was in good condition. Furniture. Stocked kitchen cabinets. Even a few of Henry's old belongings. He had prepared this for me. I set my bag down, exhaling slowly. I was safe. For the first time since this whole mess started, I had something my parents couldn't take from me. But I should have known they wouldn't let me go that easily. 3 days later, My phone rang. Mom. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. I did. What? There was a beat of silence. Then, where the hell are you? I almost laughed. Not your problem. We need to talk, she snapped. I leaned back against the couch. Oh, now you want to talk? You didn't seem interested in a conversation when you were robbing me blind. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Danny. You weren't using that money. I rolled my eyes. I wasn't using it yet. You're being childish, she said. We're still your parents. No, I said, my voice cold. You're just two people who raised me. Big difference. Silence. Then she switched tactics. Her voice softened, almost sweet. Danny, honey, we miss you. You can't just disappear like this. I smirked. Sure, I can. A sharp exhale. She was losing patience. Then, the real reason she called. You need to come home, she said. We need to figure out this house situation. My blood ran cold. I hadn't told them. I hadn't told anyone. How do you know about the house? I asked, my voice dangerously low. Mom hesitated. We have our ways. Translation. They had been snooping. And they weren't happy. Danny, listen, she said, her tone carefully measured. That house, it belongs to the family. Not just you. I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. You've got to be kidding me. Your father and I were thinking, she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. It would make the perfect retirement home for us. Smaller, easy to maintain. You wouldn't even need it. I let out a breath. Then I laughed. It wasn't funny. It wasn't funny at all. But the sheer audacity. You stole my money, I said slowly, and now you want my house? Our house, she corrected, her voice tight. I shook my head. It's not yours. You're being selfish. I clenched my jaw. No. I'm finally putting myself first. Her mask slipped. You owe us, she snapped. We took care of you. We. I hung up, blocked her number. Then I sat in the quiet of my house, and breathed. For the first time, they had nothing left to take. And I had nothing left to give.